was looking around for a new project. I was asked about the Wilber family of White Creek by somebody researching in Hoosick, and as I had never even heard the name and knew nothing, it seemed like a great idea to start researching the forgotten people of White Creek and see what I could find. First off, I found George's stone in Section C of Rosewood Cemetery, broken and leaning against another gravestone, but no other stones with the name Wilber. So I set out to research the family, and to my surprise found an abundance of information available. Having located the Wilber residence on the 1853 Pearsall Smith map, I left the cemetery and drove the 2.7 miles west to the site on Lincoln Hill Road. George Wilber, or Wilber, was born 11 February 1789 to Nicanor Wilber and Mirabel Sherman in Rhode Island. At age 25, he married Tryphena Slocum on November 17, 1814, probably in the Cambridge district of Washington County, New York, as White Creek didn't exist until 1815. So he could have moved to White Creek around 1809. He would have needed to be old enough to own property, age 21, but he does not show up on the 1810 census. It seems most likely then that he moved between mid-1810 and 1813, unless he was living with someone else and didn't show up as a head of household. Tryphena was the oldest daughter of Elijah Slocum and Hannah Preston of White Creek. She was born February 22, 1795, in the Cambridge district of Washington County, New York, later to become White Creek in 1815. Elijah was born in 1770 in Paulding, Dutchess County, New York. Hannah was the daughter of Levi Preston and Deliverance Mosher, very early settlers of White Creek. Levi fought on the British side at the Battle of Bennington and soon after died in prison. His brother Othniel also fought on the British side and died of wounds suffered in the battle. There wasn't much to see there, as these photos illustrate. Their house was just downstream from Todd Tabor's land, between the road and the brook on the short stretch where the brook runs south of the road, according to the map. This would place it on Joseph Hunt's or Michael Cameron's land today, across the road from the state forest land. There isn't much room there, but of course the road was narrower in those days. After the place was sold to Shadrach Potter, his house appears on the other side of the road on the 1866 Beers Atlas map. One or the other map could be wrong, but it's more likely that Wilber's original house was damaged by flooding and Shadrach moved to higher ground. Tryphena probably grew up a short distance northeast of where she and George settled. Elijah Slocum had been deceased for 2 years and Hannah by 3 by the time the first map was made, but the place at the south end of the notch shown on the 1853 map as being owned by J. Lake is across the road from Slocum's Pond, so this seems likely. She was one of 7 girls, one of whom, Mahala, died young and was succeeded by another daughter of the same name. George does appear in the 1820 census with his family. It looks like there were 4 males, including himself, 3 under 11 years old and 1 between 18 and 26. I would guess the latter would be someone working for him. There was also 1 girl besides his wife. The 1830 census shows 2 boys 5 to 9, 2 10 to 15, 1 20 to 29, and 1 40 to 50, which would be himself. Also 2 girls aged 1 to 19 and 2 aged 20 to 29 plus his wife. It could be construed that he and Tryphena had 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls, but this isn't necessarily so, as anyone who was in the house when the census was taken was counted. The 1840 census has 4 males plus 4 females for a total of 8 persons. This would seem to give them a family of 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. In the 1850 census, George, age 61, Tryphena, age 53, Charlotte, age 23, and Hannah, age 19 show up, along with a William Whitaker, age 13. After a lot of research, mostly from information from Momence, Illinois, they came up with 4 boys and 3 girls. Slocum, born 1815, Hiram, born 1817, Merritt, born 1819, and Alvin, born 1822. Then Adeline, born 1825, Charlotte, born 1827, and Hannah, born 1831. George was a seed grower, similar to the better-known Roswell Rice, and seems to have accumulated quite a bit of land in his 40 or so years in White Creek. Tryphena and the children sold off several plots of land after his death, mostly small pieces, but one of over 113 acres to Stephen Barker in 1857 for $1,600. Which would be $56,583 in today's money. From the description of this lot, it was once owned by Archibald McVicker. While McVicker owned a patent in Hebron Paulet, I believe this piece of land was most of the 1/11th part of John Greger's patent he obtained in February of 1790, when Lieutenant John Greger, grandson of Rob Roy McGregor, reached a settlement about the taking of his land by John Younglove, and it probably lies just to the north of where George lived on Lincoln Hill Road, which is state land today. If so, then the land just south of it, where George and Tryphena lived, was jointly owned by George Wilber and a Mary Tillinghast, whoever she was, probably a relative, and was previously to this deed sold to Shadrach Potter. Shadrach showed up as living there in the 1866 map, but his house is north of the road, as I previously mentioned. It may be an error on one of the maps, but Shadrach probably built a newer house and higher ground. Shadrach was married to E. Amanda Sweet and was the son of Abel Potter and Mercy Stone. Slocum Wilber had married Mary Ann Lake, a daughter of James Lake, on September 24, 1845. They moved to Momence, Illinois around 1850. Slocum started out in mercantile and later started a seed-growing business, which became at one time the largest in that state. From the Illustrated Historical Atlas of Kankakee County, Illinois, 1883. Slocum Wilber, P.O. Momence, son of George and Tryphena Slocum Wilber, was born December 21, 1815, at White Creek, Washington County, New York. He received an ordinary education in his native state and engaged as a schoolteacher when he grew to manhood. On September 24, 1845, he was married in New York to Miss Mary Ann Lake, daughter of James Lake, who was born February 13, 1822. Mr. Wilber was one of the earliest settlers of Momence. He engaged first in mercantile business, which he continued for 2 years and a half, after which he formed a partnership with G.W. Van Kirk and W.J. Stratton under the firm name of Wilber, Van Kirk and Company, and continued in the business until October 1859. In 1856, Mr. Wilber was appointed postmaster of Momence and served in that capacity 5 years. He is a pioneer seed grower of Illinois, commencing in 1855, and has continued in the same till the present time, 1 year raising and shipping about 15,000 pounds of cucumber seeds alone. A.S. and S. Wilber were instrumental in starting the town of Aroma, building the first store and the first mill at that point. Mr. and Mrs. Wilber are landmarks of Momence, having lived in the same house since 1850, the date of their immigration into the county, where they are always ready to receive their friends. Brothers Merritt and Alvin are recorded as opening one of the first stores in Momence. Merritt Wilber is also recorded as helping brother Alvin build the first mill, started in 1852, in Aroma, Illinois, in partnership with James L. Romer, after whom the town was named in a play on words. The Wilbers had bought 40 acres there and laid out the town. They weren't the earliest settlers, and a number of folks had already settled there, including Ravillo, Asa, and William Beebe from Bennington County, Vermont, very close to where the Wilbers had come from. The Wilbers ran out of money, and James Romer was appointed receiver. The mill was eventually bought by and completed by E.R. Beardsley around 1855-56. Merritt later moved to California. There is a discrepancy in the records here, as he was supposed to have been involved in building the mill in 1852, but is also recorded as dying in California in 1851 unmarried. Alvin shows up in the 1850 census. He and wife Elvira signed the above deed in Kankakee County, Illinois on March 4, 1857, to sell more of George's land, so were both alive then. I have found no record of them at all after that. is reported to have left for Oregon in 1836 or 1839. Some sources say he didn't arrive there until 1845, but he is reported as having lived in California for a time. When Portland decided it needed a marshal, he was hanging around unemployed and bunking with another fellow. He was awarded the job as a compromise candidate in the 7th ballot. He lasted less than 2 months as he had no office, no jail, and little support. He was living out in Tualatin Plains and prospecting for gold along the Pandorial in August 1855 with a Mr. W. H. Bennett. According to the Portland Times article reprinted in the Georgetown News September 20th, 1855, they found some, but not enough to mine. The Colville area was being flooded with miners at that time. Then the Indian Wars broke out, and he joined up and distinguished himself, mostly acting as a courier. He reached the rank of captain. An 1856 muster roll shows 4 commissioned officers, including himself, 4 non-commissioned officers, and 23 men. That ended in June 1857. In 1861 he returned east, married a Miss Harriet Pierce, whom he must have been courting by mail, and settled in Momence, where he went into mercantile. He died there in 1892. The 3 girls were born last after all the boys, and probably went out to Momence with their mother after George died in 1853. We'll get back to George and Tryphena after we finish up the children. Adeline Wilber, born in 1825, married Joseph Mount Webster. Her husband was a grocer. She signed a deed in Kankakee County, Illinois in 1857 for some of her father's land, and died in 1894. She and her husband, who died in 1905, are buried in the Momence Cemetery. They had at least 1 child, a daughter, Addie. Charlotte Wilber, born 1827, married William H. Patterson, who died in 1870. She died in 1874 and is buried in Momence Cemetery. They had 4 children, Albert W., Merritt E., Bertha A., who married a W. Burnham, and William L. Patterson. William came to Momence in 1840, at age 11 if his birth date is correct. Worked for Strunk for 2 years, then bought some stock from Mr. Wilber and became a partner with Joseph Webster. He married Charlotte in 1852. They became quite prosperous before his death. Anna Wilber, born in 1831, was still unmarried when she signed the 1856 deed selling her father's land. She married Jacob Burnett Hamilton in 1859. They had at least 1 child, Adeline E., born in 1860, who may have married a Mr. Frank Davis in 1881. Hannah and Jacob are buried in the Momence Cemetery, but only the base is left of her stone. George, and possibly Tryphena, but she isn't mentioned, visited the children in Momence in 1853. The railroads had recently made this kind of visit possible. They could have just gone for a visit, but perhaps they were thinking about moving there themselves to be near family, especially in their old age. Or perhaps George was trying to help out with the bankruptcy in Aroma. In any case, 3 weeks after George returned, he died suddenly and unexpectedly, leaving no will. George was buried in Rosewood near or with the Slocums. Tryphena applied to obtain the power to handle George's estate. Then she moved west to Momence with the girls. The children may have returned in 1856 to sell off George's property. Some of the deeds seem to indicate that they personally appeared in Washington County to sign them, but one appears to have been drawn up and signed in Momence. There were several pieces of property, the largest north of Shadrach Potter's and now in the state forest, sold to Stephen Barker for $1,600, which would be $59,612 today. Tryphena still had sisters living in White Creek, but there is no indication that the family ever returned to White Creek again after 1856.